Darkness enveloped the limestone hall of the Pharaoh's palace. The ceremonial drums echoed like a heartbeat, and flickering torchlight cast ominous shadows of gods onto the towering columns. Amid that sacred space, a fragile sound arose, the cry of a Hebrew infant boy. A question pierced the air. Could ordinary people, two nameless midwives, dare to defy a brutal throne through faith alone? The untold story of Shiphrah and Puah begins. From the sandy village of Goshen to the halls of power, they walk with courage, wisdom, and divine justice. As their humble midwife hands shielded innocent lives, the fate of an entire nation shifted. Follow their journey, for when faith fuses with bravery, the darkness of power trembles for all generations. August's desert blazed like a furnace, stretching from the lush delta to a horizon seething with heat. Scalding sand slipped through sandal gaps, clinging to the frayed wool hems of enslaved Israelites bent over clay troughs. They mixed straw with mud, pressed it into wooden molds, and stacked bricks in towering kilns spitting red flames. The whip's cracks sliced the air, mingling with the dry clatter of falling bricks, forming a relentless rhythm of toil, a stifling symphony that pierced the long day. Sweat fused with blood, trickling down calloused spines, and red dust rose in clouds, blurring vision, turning the sky into a copper lid sealing hope shut. Amid this scene of suffering, in a destitute corner of Goshen, Shiphrah and Puah moved quietly, like oil lamps flickering in a gale. They carried heavy clay jars of water, threading along camel-tracked paths, visiting tents to check on pregnant women. Their rough hands knew how to soothe fevered brows, warm, trembling fingers, and ease aching backs of those nearing labor. Each time they cradled a swollen belly, they whispered words woven into their very being. The Lord God knows your child's name from the womb. The cadence, soft as breath, stirred hearts battered by lashes. Then, under the noon's ferocious glare, a troop of Egyptian cavalry thundered in, bronze-armored horses gleaming. The commander, his bronze mask flashing, read a new decree. Every Hebrew boy born must be thrown to the Nile's crocodiles. His voice, dry as night sand, ground each word through clenched teeth, leaving a chilling echo in every straw hut. Terror tore through thousands of hearts, a saw blade shredding nascent hope. Mothers dreaming of their babies' cries clutched their bellies, gasping skyward, pleading for miracles. That evening, desert winds hissed through palm frond walls, fanning dim hearth fires into red ember streaks. In Shiphrah's straw hut, the two midwives huddled on a worn reed mat, firelight etching their resolute wrinkles. They didn't speak of whips or crocodiles. They spoke of a newborn's first breath. Shiphrah's voice rasped but held firm. We were born to preserve life, not end it. Puah's hand clasped her friend's, feeling the pulse race. Both knew the line they'd drawn and the cost it might demand. The night passed in fragmented prayers. Winds carried distant trumpet blasts from far-off barracks, scattering fear like ash. But as dawn purpled the distant palms, a pained cry rose from Leah's tent, a 19-year-old expectant mother. Shiphrah roused Puah, grabbing a warm water jug, a bronze cord-cutting knife, and a soot-dyed cloth roll. They hurried, feet sizzling on hot sand, hearts praying. Be near, O Lord. In the cramped tent, heat and blood's metallic tang mingled. Leah, exhausted, faded. Shiphrah leaned close, whispering, God is with you. After fierce pushes, a boy slipped free, red and raw, his hoarse cry filling his lungs. Without time to clean him, Puah swaddled him in dark cloth, tucking him to his mother's chest. The midwives crouched by the door, listening as hoofbeats faded. In Leah's tear-soaked, faint smile, a spark tore through the dark. Do we obey man or God? Dusk stained the sand copper as Shiphrah and Puah slipped to a barren plot behind the camp. A crescent moon hung thin as a sickle above a distant pyramid's peak. Under a deep indigo sky, they mapped protection, assigning watch shifts, setting a sheepskin whistle signal, 3 short notes, 1 long for summons, and repurposing abandoned ancestral wine cellars as hideouts. They urged mothers to wrap infants in dark-dyed cloth, young men to blind guards with eucalyptus fires during night births. Each plan was a stitch in a protective cloak, for they knew defying the decree was planting a seed of rebellion in the desert's fire. The scene was quiet, without spears or clamor, just humble women weaving hope. From the damp tent's corner, murmured prayers rose to a dust-starred sky. Night winds blew gently, carrying sweet, sharp palm resin and crickets' lonesome chirps. A secret hymn. Shiphrah looked up, the sky vaster than any wall of power. In its silver glow, she envisioned each cry preserved, each mother's heart unbroken, and freedom's seeds silently taking root. Returning, cold sand pricked their feet, but their hearts blazed. Before sleep, Shiphrah pressed a hand to her chest, feeling a rhythm both urgent and calm, like the gongs at the worksite. But this beat rang hope. Puah closed her eyes, whispering scripture. He who keeps Israel neither slumbers nor sleeps. Outside, another infant's cry rang through the night, a prelude to a sacred march for justice. The patrol from Eastgate Watch, a mere spear's throw from Goshen, became a dread chorus after each sunset. They doubled their ranks, lit extra oil torches, and swapped leather whips for long bronze rods with hooked barbs. Firelight swept Israelite tent flaps, casting jagged shadows like prowling beasts. Nightly, the hunt began with a shrill horn, followed by iron boots clacking on dry earth, stripping secrets bare. Shiphrah and Puah swiftly altered their watch schedule. Since the new decree, the village split into 3 alert rings. Outer, teenage boys feigning goat herding. Middle, mothers carrying late grain baskets to block soldiers. Inner, just the 2 midwives. When a woman went into labor, Puah whistled 4 notes. Elohim is with us. The sound, thin as desert wind, pierced straw walls. At the signal, young men lit eucalyptus fires, their pungent resin masking blood and moans. On a late moon night, Rachel, a young wife whose husband toiled in Pitom's clay pits, writhed in gut-wrenching contractions. Sand and soot crusted under her tent's floor, her hands clawing for something to grip without breaking. Puah stood at the door, petite, but arms tough as sun-dried rope. Shiphrah knelt by Rachel, murmuring Psalm 121, fingers hurriedly sprinkling myrrh ash into a water basin to dull the fresh scent. As the boy slid from his mother, his cry barely rose before torchlight danced outside. An Egyptian officer parted the tent flap, the reek of heated bronze flooding in. His eyes scanned the cramped space, lingering on a fresh blood stain. Shiphrah tucked dark cloth tightly around the infant, pressing him to Rachel's chest. Her face bloomed a strangely calm smile. "Hebrew women birth fast, sir. By the time we arrived, the child was out, the mother already bandaged." The officer's gaze narrowed, but the frail woman before him and the acrid eucalyptus sting made him grimace. He shot a contemptuous look, then waved his torch and left, leaving smoke to choke the air. By dawn, news of the midwives' deception spread like wildfire on dry grass. Listeners stifled laughs despite whip-scarred backs, but more smiles meant more spies. Meru, a notoriously cruel overseer, scratched his neck and cross-checked birth logs. He found 15 boys missing, with no record of bodies checked in the Nile's drift. His rage roared to Memphis, reaching the court's chambers. The next evening, Goshen's market, usually loud with bartered grain and dried fish, fell silent as a bronze-plated chariot halted. A court envoy in a black robe with gold trim stood on the cart and read in a steely voice, "Shiphrah and Puah, names etched on this clay tablet, must reach Memphis by dawn to answer for the shortage of Hebrew male infants. Non-compliance is treason." Each word landed like a pickaxe into daily bread. Market women held their breath. Even the burliest man bowed his head, fearing guilt by association. Clutching the crimson clay tablet, Shiphrah and Puah felt death's breath on their necks. Yet, instead of shrinking, they summoned clan elders under a gnarled palm by an irrigation ditch. Sunset's red blaze painted fiery streaks on bare branches, reflecting in the crowd's bloodshot eyes. Puah spread a soiled cloth on the sand, placing 6 stones, each for a family group. She explained, if they didn't return in 3 days, activate the eastern hideout. Men must carry infants and mothers via the sand route to the Seir Mountains, to the little-known Weeping Lion Cave, a safe refuge. In that moment, all understood. The diminutive midwives were holding the final gate for life, while the others must wing the fledglings to freedom. The circle joined hands, each trembling finger swearing an oath. The village's eldest tied a red grass-braided cord around Shiphrah's wrist, a fragile talisman binding resolve stronger than iron shackles. Night fell, the Nile's breeze carrying a briny damp through the marshy flats. The midwives stepped to the riverbank, where golden moonlight shimmered on deceptively calm waters. They knelt on wet sand, waves lapping as if mourning the thousands cast into its depths. Shiphrah's voice, hoarse but steady, "Lord God of Abraham, of Jacob, though we lose our lives, your justice is mightier than the Nile." Puah added, "Carve righteousness on these waters, to protect, not devour." They rose, sand clinging wet to their hems, weighing their steps, but their eyes blazed with conviction. Far off, the horizon glowed molten red, like forged steel. Their silhouettes melted into the fiery dusk, small as 2 dots on a history thought closed. Yet those dots bore the survival of a nation, the lives of infants yet to call for their mothers. En route to Memphis, the prisoner cart rolled through papyrus fields, their sharp resin scent stinging the air. Scattered escorts gripped spears, occasionally barking quiet when Puah softly sang an ancient Hebrew lullaby, "Yahweh shields you, Yahweh is near." The tune, faint, cut the grim air like gold thread on coarse cloth. Tension peaked not just at the destination, but in each wheel's sandy grind. Every rut left a skeletal "if." If Pharaoh condemned, if priests wielded suppressing rights, if they had to choose silence to live. But for Shiphrah, the only if chilling her was witnessing another tiny life snuffed at its first breath. As the cart passed Memphis's gates, a towering turquoise Horus statue spread colossal wings, blocking the sun, as if to smother conscience. Puah's breath faltered, but her eyes fixed on the palace temple, lips muttering Psalm 27. The Lord is my light and salvation. Whom shall I fear? Each step toward the throne's great hall would decide not just their fate, but that of the Eastern hideout network awaiting a signal. In this moment, guards' torches cast their shadows long on basalt floors, gliding past a serpent-carved map encircling the palace. To onlookers, they were just two small women marching to judgment. But the heavens saw an invisible army of mothers, infants, and prayers trailing behind. Amid Egypt's thousand-year stone drums paving the way, the midwives' heartbeats merged, voicing an untouchable vow. You entrusted us to guard the first breath. Guide us through the final blade. Through the glossy black basalt corridor, cold as ice, Shiphrah and Puah walked like grains of sand slipping between giant stones. The guards' boots clacked on the floor, echoing in a heart-piercing chain. The vaulted ceiling bore carvings of Ra, and sunlight from skylights cast blinding gold streaks, highlighting desert dust on their robe hems. Frankincense and myrrh thickened the air, blending sacred with stifling. Each step seared Shiphrah's soles, as if treading fire of power. Yet her gaze held steady, knowing the fate of countless infants rested on her next breath. The throne hall opened, vast as a dark sea, torchlight glinting off a colossal Horus statue standing sentinel. At its center, Pharaoh sat imperious on a jade granite throne, crowned with the double crown, neck weighed by gold, wielding a crook and flail scepter. His coal-lined eyes gleamed like steel, piercing any veil of deception. Courtiers knelt in long rows, priests lurked among lotus columns, ready to signal punishment. Shiphrah's legs trembled faintly, but she recalled Psalm 27. The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? The verse pulsed in her chest, lifting her above dread. Pharaoh's voice rumbled, deep as thunder drums. Why do Hebrew infants live? The final note lingered, silencing the hall. All expected trembling pleas for mercy. But Shiphrah bowed, then raised her head, voice eerily steady. Your Majesty, Hebrew women are robust. When labor strikes, they birth swiftly. Before we arrive, she paused and hailed, adding pragmatic bait for his iron heart. Moreover, when their sons live, they recover faster, labor harder. Your brick stores will fill quicker, your cities rise taller. For a moment, the air seemed vacuum dry. A priest scowled, mouth opening, but Pharaoh's raised hand silenced him. He crossed his scepter, weighing profit against loss, royal eyes calculating. Then, under the vault's distant horn echoes, Pharaoh laughed dryly, a sound like stones in a well. Let them live. But from today, brick quotas rise by a third. The words landed heavy. A boulder rolled toward Israel, yet an unexpected shield deflecting death's blade. Shiphrah bowed, daring not to sigh relief, though her lips quivered, knowing hundreds of newborn breaths were spared. As the midwives exited, Memphis's sun tilted west, stretching their shadows endlessly along the corridor. Cold sweat soaked their backs, hearts pounding chaotically, yet a soft peace flooded them like a spirit's whisper. You stood and I stood with you. But joy was salted by the looming lash of harsher quotas. The blade had retreated, but chains tightened, weighing their hearts like mourning water jars. At dusk, they reached Goshen. The tent village quietly bloomed with the oil lamps, a low constellation, no drums, no dances, just wet eyes, clasped hands, and passed barley bread. Jubilation stayed cloaked, but in each tent, mothers' breaths deepened, infants' babbles soared over fear. In a dark brown hut, Shiphrah unrolled a goatskin mat, spreading a hand-drawn map of ruined wine cellars. Puah pulled out dyed jute threads, blue for safe paths, red for decoy roads, gold for herb caches. They marked, adjusted, devised a new signal. Too short notes, too long. Less guards decipher the old tune. Through the night, callous fingers wove connections across straw, turning a dusty community into a bedrock of resistance. Babies nursed under flickering lamps. Fathers patched shirts to hide clotting herbs. Girls practiced fake moans to mislead soldiers. Each detail was a delicate fringe, yet wove a miraculous net under the empire's nose. As Shiphrah closed the plan book, Puah softly sang, Yahweh shields me, in deep night he wakes. The melody drifted through clay walls, reaching elders, touching the hearts of mud-smeared boys. Strangely in the gloom, even Pharaoh's brick walls seemed to hum a promise of liberation. Near dawn, Shiphrah sat alone, staring at dying coals, reflecting on their choice. She saw clearly, the battle didn't end here, it only changed form. More whips, bricks, tears awaited, and perhaps a day she wouldn't return. But she also saw tiny faces, black eyes reflecting lamplight. Each child was a sharp stone in tyranny's current, parting the waters. She whispered, if we preserve their breaths, he will preserve our future. Outside, dawn painted the sky in orange and purple. Labor bells chimed, summoning Israel to the worksite with heavier quotas. But on muddy paths, instead of complaints, a message passed. The midwives returned. Leah's son lives. The words, like raindrops on parched sand, didn't crack the earth yet, but sowed strength. Shiphrah clasped Puah's hand before heading to another laboring mother. We're not heroes, just sprouts in God's great hand. Puah replied, lips trembling, but eyes bright, and that hand has never failed. Pharaoh thought he'd tighten labor's grip, unaware he'd fanned a hidden spark. Bricks might stack higher, cities grow grander, but each red brick echoed the lullaby Yahweh shields, and every infant's breath hid God's might. That day wasn't here, but as history's hourglass spilled grain by grain, an ancient promise would bloom. It began in the basalt hall, where two ordinary women stood on faith, wielding supple wit to deflect tyranny's blow, letting fragile breaths sing on in the world. Winter's onset cloaked Goshen in thin mist, a damp warning of a king's wrathful storm. For 3 months, over 30 Hebrew boys cried out without a single body swept down the Nile. Whispers reached Memphis. 2 midwives had turned the slave village into a hive hiding infants. Pharaoh slammed his scepter on granite, voice thundering, whoever harbors them, slay without trial. The serpent-sealed decree unleashed cavalry to scour Goshen before dawn. At first light, hoofbeats churned dust like kiln smoke, hope's echo fading. Shiphrah, hearing the clamor, squeezed Puah's hand, signaling the straw tunnel plan. Newborns were passed through back alleys behind cattle pens, tucked into earthen roof granaries, their cries muffled by bleeding goats. Soldiers stormed in, torches scorching straw walls, bronze swords stabbing bales, overturning baskets, finding only dry wine jugs and empty cradles. The captain, livid, lashed his whip, leaving charred welts, then led his men out, howling bitter curses. As the cavalry vanished around a bend, mothers in tents collapsed onto sand, sobbing with terror and relief. Sweat and salty tears streaked sun-darkened cheeks, tracing paths on dust-gray faces. Fathers drying bricks at distant yards, dropped molds, rushing back under pretense of gathering straw, but truly to check their infants' breaths. Elders prayed with bowed backs, but spirits upright as masts. Every soul knew the fight had outgrown humble tents, becoming a clash between tangible tyranny and the intangible endurance of faith passed through generations. At night, as eucalyptus fires faded, Shiphrah patrolled the village, smelling ash and milk. Hearing a girl's clumsy psalm hum, her heart surging with renewed resolve, fierce as a spring beneath scorched sand. But as joy warmed, new peril sparked. A spy trailed the midwives, galloping through the night, reporting straight to the court. By morning, an urgent arrest order reached Goshen, this time with blades at throats. Shiphrah and Puah must appear before noon. The black basalt corridor opened, searing like a dragon's spine. The throne hall loomed, where Pharaoh sat in majesty, flanked by sorcerers Yanas and Jambras wielding blood-scrawled censers. Gray smoke coiled into serpents around pillars, slithering near the bound women's heads. Pharaoh roared, "Who dares mock Sobek?" Shiphrah bowed, then rose, eyes steady. "Innocent blood doesn't honor gods. Their lives fuel your armies. Kill the seed. Where's your slave harvest?" Courtiers froze. A boy's cry, held as evidence, echoed through the corridor, bouncing off the vault like an accusation. As it rang, the sky darkened. An unseasonal sandstorm crashed through skylights, lashing columns, snuffing torches, twisting silk drapes. The omen paled the superstitious Pharaoh. Swords at necks eased back. Guards' hands stalled. No one dared spill blood under Ra's wrath. The midwives were thrown into Memphite's stone dungeon, deep and dank. Walls slick with moss, rats skittering past chains. In darkness, Puah sang Nila, "Yahweh cradles you, Yahweh lifts your soul." The echo seeped through bars, kindling hope in fellow prisoners. On day 2, the storm raged on, burying Karnak's pilgrimage road, stranding trade boats. Ptah's priests warned Pharaoh Ra was enraged by innocent blood, haunted by a dream of a crimson Nile. Pharaoh, shaken, freed Shiphrah and Puah, but demanded weekly birth logs. On the 3rd day's dusk, Goshen greeted them with the flute's Elohim is with us from every tent porch. No one dared cheer loudly, but oil lamps blazed, honey cakes scented the air, and crucially, no child was torn from a mother's arms. In an old granary, Shiphrah unrolled calfskin, sketching a false birth ledger. Puah logged low numbers, embedding secret marks to flag infants needing urgent evacuation when soldiers came. A mundane tablet became a shield for life. Night fell, desert winds whistling through thatch. Shiphrah gazed at stars spilling silver over the calm Nile, whispering, "You made sand blunt swords, make water part." In the granary's corner, Puah cradled baby Haggai, feeling his fragile pulse, replying, "As great as our faith, so wide the path he opens." They knew dawn would bring higher brick quotas, patrol torches, sharp blades, but they'd faced the throne, stared down sorcerers, heard a king's thunder, and lived. Now they were spiritual pillars, rallying drums, night sentinels. They became living proof, reminding Israel that small acts amid peril could shake power's stone foundation. Their quiet victory was like a sandstorm, hazy, slow, but relentless, eroding proud statues. In the lullaby blending with breeze, liberation's promise echoed through brick walls. One day, today's tiny hands would shatter chains, paving the Red Sea's path, because two women dared guard the first breath with unshakable faith. 7 weeks later, a rare thin fog draped Goshen, like a veil of grace over earthen tents. Shiphrah and Puah, in coarse cloaks, moved through the camp, summoning young girls to train as midwives. Hands once trembling now learned to gauge contractions, swaddle infants, and rub herbal oils. The bright eyes of a new generation mirrored resolve. Protect newborn cries, preserve the nation's seed. No one stood alone. The village wove a tight net like a reed mat, each knot a heart guarding life. Secret joy swelled when Yocheved, a quiet mother, finished a pitch-sealed reed basket. At dawn, she gently set her 3-month-old son adrift on the Nile. Shiphrah stood on the bank, hand on heart, whispering, "Hope's sprout floats into God's hands." The community watched the basket bob among hyacinths, believing the river that drank blood would yield a miracle. Soon word spread, Shiphrah and Puah were pregnant, late in life. Their rounded bellies became bold symbols that God remembered those who preserved first breaths. Each evening, children circled, pressing ears to hear kicks, giggling as if hearing folk tales. Old women, once haunted by whips, murmured, "If he opens the midwives' wombs, he'll shatter our chains." A year passed. In a riverside tent, Shiphrah birthed a healthy girl named Tikvah, Hope. She laid her on her chest, tears falling, knowing she'd brought a symbol into reality. Soon after, Puah sounded 3 short whistles, 4 long, a joyful signal. She bore twin boys, crying red and robust, named Ovid, Servant, and Nur, Lamp. The naming ceremony turned the riverbank into a sea of torches, light reflecting on the Nile like stars descended. From Memphis came rumors. The palace adopted a Hebrew prince. Shiphrah and Puah knew their faith's journey had turned a page. They were merely its first stones. At the brick kilns, men bent but hearts expanded. They counted blistered hands, dreaming of the boy who'd one day challenge the throne. Years curved into a river, washing away whip scars but preserving the glint in believers' eyes. Through flood seasons, the Nile rose and receded, while Tikvah chased butterflies. Ovid practiced reed flutes, and Nur wove straw baskets for his mother. By the clay ovens, Puah retold the divine sandstorm. Firelight cast red serpents writhing on walls. Children squealed, yet begged for more. When Moses returned, calling for Exodus, Shiphrah's heart trembled as it had before Pharaoh. The night before the march, she gathered flour, herbs, and the fake birth ledger that once fooled death's decree. At dawn, she took Tikvah's hand. Puah led Ovid and Ner, leaving Goshen, cradle of life amid death, toward the desert. The Red Sea loomed like steel barring hope. Chariot hooves thundered behind, children wailing. But as Moses raised his staff, east winds blew all night. Shiphrah felt the water recede beneath her midwife's heels. She led Tikvah down the cracked, bubbling mud path, hearing her old question echo, "Can ordinary people defy tyranny?" She answered yes when they placed their hand in God's. Water walls towered, reflecting Israel's torches, like crystal etched with redemption's vow. On the far shore, Shiphrah and Puah pitched the first free nation's birthing tent, laying out olive oil, silver knives, linen cloths. Each tool gleamed under the wild sun. When the first child was born on golden sand, the midwives and their aides knelt, the infant's cry blending with a please, a living message. Faith moves history. Now this story reaches you. What flame of courage awaits your spark? God still seeks ordinary hands to write history's next page. Share, subscribe, and comment. What emboldens you to stand today? Your small light might part a Red Sea in another's life. From Goshen to your heart, faith and courage always kindle justice. Don't wait for sandstorms or sealed seas. Start with the breath you protect, the words you speak, the kindness you sow in daily deserts. When He breathes into a mortal heart, nothing is too small, no one too obscure to shift history's scales. Amen.